I don't want to sound too excited like I'm getting on the home stretch here, but some of the big items that have rented space in my head since the beginning of this project are in work, if not behind me. Today we're going to talk a windshield, the glare shield over the instrument panel, sheet metal covers in the back, tail wheel, and turtle deck, all of which might be slightly different than whatever you're building. Okay, before you blindly follow what I do, and I hope nobody is, I'm going to urge you to avail yourself of all information, which is to go watch Brian Bowen's video on windshield, skylight, and glare shield installation, and also Harlan Payne, that's Farm Fox. If I remember, I will put links in the description below. Having said that, I am like most people where this windshield installation has bothered me for a long time because of the propensity they have to crack, and I can tell you so far, no cracks. So, quick review. You get the boot cowl drilled up and fitted to the A-pillar here, and everywhere else it goes. I have mine also drilled up along the top of the firewall. With that in place, you know where it's going. The challenge of actually all these pieces. This boot cowl, it's pretty floppy. The windshield is floppy. And this glare shield has issues, which I'm going to get into. Ignore all the tape for a minute. I'm going to explain. So one of the first challenges you face when trimming the windshield is it's too long here and actually may even ride on your firewall. So what you do is you install your boot cowl and you make a mark. I just made it on the protective coating. You see I still have a little bit of it left here. And then you go down 2 inches from there, and then you make that mark and you trim this off. Then you make 2 more cuts, and they are these A-pillars. Now the material is too long and it's also not even straight. Now Brian made a comment in his video that you couldn't stretch the windshield over the outside of the A-pillars, and I was under the same impression, which meant that you would be on and off of this windshield probably 20 times trying to find the line inside that you would cut to. When I mentioned that to Nate Ashton here at the airport, he's built 3 of these planes now, he said you absolutely have to stretch it over to the outside. And the other thing you'll be told about these windshields is that you should do it when it's nice and hot outside. I agree with that. You definitely reduce the opportunity for cracks, but it's not summertime here, it's January. Well, I'm here to tell you that stretching it over the outside does work. It enables you to mark these edges and trim them. And by the way, I use my Milwaukee M12. It's basically their version of a cordless Dremel tool. Interesting story, I already own one of those Dremel tools, but it was 180 miles away, so I went and bought a second one. It lasted about 5 minutes. I took it back, they just swapped it out right away. In the meantime, I made cuts with my old school Dremel tool, which had been pretty reliable, and in fact it did the job here. The difference is orders of magnitude. This tool has way more torque, is way more capable at doing the job. And these cutoff wheels I'm using for all of the trim work are just the ones that come so organized here in the bag with this thing. Anyway, so cut across the front, cut here, and then here's where Brian and I diverged because he kept trimming, and because this thing is so floppy, I went ahead and drilled the A-pillar holes and the holes common to the boot cowl. And I got to tell you, it was so nice for me to not have to sit here and think about spacing or what I was going to do. I just drove down the airport, got into Nate's hangar, took his measuring tape, figured out what he did, and just copied him. It made what probably would have taken me 2 days into about an hour's worth of work. So with the boot cowl and the windshield portion trimmed and drilled up, now this is not going anywhere, and it enabled me to mark out the butt ribs and drill those holes. And of course everybody knows I can't follow instructions, which start at having you set up this header piece and using a straight edge, locating it. It is actually located right now, but it's not bonded because I haven't painted it or wrapped it or whatever it is I'm going to do. But as long as I get this in the right place before I drill any holes beyond what's already in my butt rib cap strips, I should be good to go. And by the way, I did follow, I think Brian said he was too far down the road, but I drilled mine. I flipped the butt ribs around so the large side of the cap strip was inside, and so my holes are as far away as possible from the edge of the acrylic, which would hopefully lessen the opportunities for cracks. And then, with these holes drilled and the top of the windshield clecoed in place, then I came back and I marked this edge and pulled the windshield off and cut that. Again, no cracks. I do have some very minor marks in here, but this is supposed to get cleared out anyway. I was looking at Brian's videos last night to see how much he cleared out. I'm nervous about cutting out too much, but guaranteed I will cut out all of this that has the tiniest of stress marks in here. And then also when I was over at Nate's hangar, I looked and I was surprised that he didn't cut this out ahead of time, because that's what it tells you in the manual. So obviously Nate doesn't follow instructions either. He said he just uses a step drill and drills a round hole like pretty much everybody does at the back. So interesting. So then it came time to do the glare shield installation, and now that I rewatched Harlan's video where he said he'd rather do windshields than glare shield any day, I am totally on board. Again, I referred to how floppy the boot cowl is, the windshield is floppy, and then this thing is not only floppy, it seems to have a little bit of a rack to it. Now I arrogantly assumed that this glare shield was going to touch the inside of the windshield all the way around, and as Brian said in his video, it doesn't. It gets around the corner here and then it starts to pull away to the point where there's a big gap inside here. And why that is, I'm not sure, but that's where you start from. You can see this gigantic hole up here. This is a result of me using the paper template, which is available amongst forum members. I think it was John Evans that made it up. I got a copy of it, printed it out. It was 1-to-1. I trimmed it and it was on my glare shield and it was off a country mile, probably 2 inches. This flange, it should be in contact with the forward edge or the inside of the windshield, was not even close. Here's my disclaimer. Of course, this is a Series 5, Series 7. This V-brace may be in a different spot. This glare shield, it came with my kit, have no idea, so any of that stuff may not be what you experience, but before I get done here, I will be creating a template for the Series 5, so if you're ever in the same boat as me, let me know. I'll come up with a pattern. And where I assumed that I was going to be able to make that row of holes, at least part way along, I was thinking I was going to put nut plates on the fiberglass part and then have the hole all the way through the boot cowl, through the windshield, which of course will be opened up to 1/4 inch, into the nut plate, super easy. Anyway, so I had the holes. You see they don't line up. Don't get too concerned. I only have one hole in the windshield. It's laid out perfectly. The other hole you see is because I had the glare shield installed and I had this edge matched up real nice. And then I came back the next day and I've drawn this in so you can see it. I've also run a light inside. There's kind of a break. So I made this line because you can't really see it very easily, certainly not without this backlight on here, that it's continuous and then it's kind of got a break. And I thought, well, that'll be great. It'll be a little bit of a lip that I can put some trim on, and I can put my LED strip on the inside. That'll work out perfect. And when I came back yesterday, just before I had drawn this line, I saw that it had a big overhang on one side and no overhang on the other side. So the whole thing was skewed. And that's why I had to abandon these holes, which they won't be visible anyway, because you can see this is where my boot cowl comes up to when it's pinned in place. Or I can just fill them because I've got some milled fibers. Alright, GoPro went dead, switching to camera. So the Series 5 manual comes along, and back in the day what they used to do is have you drill a separate row of holes down here below the edge and then use some 832 fasteners. And I'm not positive how that's going to work out, because in my head this flange right here on the boot cowl matches this perfectly, but I do see there's a big fat radius. Might have to countersink these holes so that they're down below this grade so that the boot cowl is not riding up on there and causing some stress risers in the acrylic. But anyway, I kind of like this idea because it's going to hold securely. And while most of us think, gosh, I'd like to work on my instrument panel, it'd be cool if I could take the glare shield off. Truth is, I get a big hole by taking off the boot cowl. And then if I pop off the glare shield, which will be easy once the boot cowl is taken off, then I've got all kinds of room to work on the instrument panel. So after probably 4 to 6 hours of tweaking this glare shield to get this line to be uniform, I actually used this as my datum and then figured out how to get the rest of it to work. So just now this morning I came back and I laid out this row holes here, 5/16, same edge margin I used for the butt ribs up here. And now I'm going to blow this hole out 1/4 inch with the acrylic bit and nuts on the back side, and I'm going to see if this really works. Oh, explain my madness here. So I ran this tape on here yesterday so I could make some registration marks, and now that I've got them figured out, you can see at one point I had it real close, and the tip of that V should have touched the tip of that one, and you can see how much I had to move it to get it to work in the end. Well, I didn't want to use acetone to get the Sharpie off here because it would have hazed the windshield irreparably, so I just put tape over the top, made another registration mark, and so now that these holes are drilled, I'm kind of done with all that. So I can take off this tape and this tape, replace these fasteners, and this, I'm not going to leave this tape on here either. I'm just a few days from going back to work for a couple of weeks. Leaving tape on anything is bad. So here's what this looks like with a 832 and 526 screw, a washer nut on the back side, not even torqued, just enough to snug this down. 4 places. It does look a little bit big. I'm about to find out. Okay, through the miracle of editing, this will all have gone very smoothly. Boot cowls on there, windshield skylight, and glare shield. And through the miracle of backlighting, you can see I got that. Little edge brake I was talking about, consistent. Anyway, same bit of oil canning on both sides, at least it's equal. That gap is equal. I'll be able to trim this off about 1 inch-ish. By the way, when I drilled these up, I just had 2 drills with me. I had a number 30 high-speed steel. I had this all covered with tape, and I had center punch. Drilled a hole in the instant I broke through the steel. I pulled that out, cleared out the chips, and then just grabbed the 1/8 inch acrylic bit, drilled the rest of the way through, clecoed my way. It worked out great. Then, of course, the windshield is going to come off again because I have to do the back edge still. Deburred everything. So on the back edge, don't be alarmed, this is a normal appearance. If I had more clecos in my pocket, I'd suck this down so you can see what it looks like. But once it gets attached to this header piece, the curled edge here is normal. I think it's to prevent a catastrophic situation if you were to fold the wings from an open position. If this didn't have enough clearance, it could hook on here and do all kinds of nastiness. My Skylight, the only damage it has suffered in all the abuse I've given it so far, and it was actually before me because this didn't happen in my possession, but this edge right here has got a little bit of a chip to it. And so their intention, of course, is that everybody has an acrylic turtle deck, and I don't. I've got the old school one. You can go way back in my videos. I ordered this with the bubble in it, thinking I was going to get the bubble and the acrylic clear feature. I don't know that that actually exists. If anybody has one, let me know and I'll heat up a credit card. Anyway, this spacer is one I got from Kitfox recently. It's just a piece of acrylic, and it's meant to create a gap between the bottom of the Skylight and the top edge of this header for the Skylight for the turtle deck to slide into. Well, the turtle deck is 20 thousandths aluminum, so I don't need a big gap like that, but I could end up with some kind of a stiffening strip on here. I have to go through the manual. Next month I'll whack this turtle deck out, mount my flaperons. I whipped out these sheet metal pieces that were started by a previous builder a long time ago. I can see what his intent was. This would be the top, the aluminum angle in there is the datum. These holes are all garbage for me. This slot is too close to the horizontal stabilizer. I mean, it fits, but it's not enough gap. This one actually fit pretty darn close. I get this everywhere. I'll still have to recreate my own holes. I'll be putting nut plates on this aluminum flange and this one, and drilling through the tabs and using Tinnerman nuts. So I just need to get some new aluminum, and I'll use these as a template to create the new ones. Still have to whip out the edge tapes for that whole edge and along here. That'll be next time. Tail wheel, hooked up the compression springs. My rudder seems real stiff right now, and I think it's because of the tail wheel, because when I got the bolts in here, by the way, I think I posted some stuff online, but it hasn't been in a video yet. I finally got these bolts in. What a nightmare. Nate loaned me his hemostats, which made the job way easier. It's still kind of funny because I fought this top one for like an hour, and then out of desperation I decided to move on. Did the middle one, which dropped right in. The bottom one took a few minutes. Another hour up on top. But I got all the bolts in, and then came back the next day and was working on the nuts and washers. Full disclosure, previous builder ground off the stops that you can't see from here that limit rudder travel. You can see, well, if I wasn't fighting the stiff tail wheel, that I can actually touch the elevator. There is an angular measurement in the manual. I need to restrict it to that, and the guy ground off the tabs. It's pretty common. If somebody tells you 28 degrees and you did 28 degrees on either side of center, then you cut off too much material, way too much. I have seen people recover from that issue down below by creating some stops that actually have a bolt head in them so you can adjust them with a gem nut. And I was laying down underneath the airplane when I was fitting up those compression springs and the chains, and I realized I can totally reach it, drill it, tap it from those little tabs that are in there. So rudder is on until I'm too old to care. Doors I have on the other side of the mountains, and through the miracle of cheap video editing tricks, it's time for me to kick rocks to this side of the mountains where things are much larger. You wouldn't guess by looking at it right now, but my Kitfox is going to share space in this hangar with the T-28. And if I've included any discussion about this airplane, it hasn't been recently. Say T-28 C model, this engine right here, is a little bit larger than the Verner Scarlet 7 in my Kitfox. This is a Curtiss Wright R1820, so it's 1,820 cubic inches. That's over 200 cubic inches per cylinder, about 3.3 liters. 1,425 horsepower, assuming the Navy is paying for engines and gas, which they're not doing. This is a gear case right here. This is a geared engine. The engine turns over 3 times for 2 rotations of the propeller. Familiar with T-28s at all? This is not the correct nose wheel for this because this is also not the correct propeller. This is off a Grumman S2 tracker. I am 6 foot 2 inches and I can cleanly walk underneath this wing. Feature of the C model is the tailhook. This is when I flew back from Georgia via Texas about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago now. This is about 8,500 pounds with 2 people and some gas in the tanks. Pretty cool. These are the steps you use to get up to the cockpit. Cockpits are identical. This is the rear. This is the front. Same. Hold a ton of fuel. Pretty simple fuel system, just like the Kitfox. On and off. Anyway, a little bit of rearranging. This thing will easily fit in here with the Kitfox. I have to take fellow Kitfox builder Gary up on his offer to trailer my Kitfox over here so that I can house it here and do all the initial flying. Gary actually has flown these, and also F4 Phantoms, which makes him the coolest dude I know. Unlike the Verner, this is more like most radial engine airplanes. It houses, in this case, about 15 gallons of oil way up high on the firewall. And actually one of the modifications I'm doing to this plane right now is installing an oil shutoff valve, which will go, see, that is where the oil line, which is quite large, might get a view of it. And that's where it comes from. It is much fatter than this hose here. There'll be an electric solenoid right here, and it has a fail open, just in case anybody's concerned about that idea. Very common addition to these things because otherwise it bleeds oil constantly. Anyway, super fun airplane to fly, very light on the controls. North American took everything they learned from the T6 and the P-51 and they wrapped it into this post-World War II trainer plane. This airplane was eventually superseded by the T-34
specifically the C model, which was a turboprop. Plane cruises 180 to 220 knots, depending on how hard you're pushing it. Speaking of that, so the legend of these airplanes is they will outclimb a P-51, and in fact most World War II planes, except for the F-6F Hellcat, to 10,000 feet. It will outroll a P-51. I wouldn't know. 1,425 horsepower is, I believe, the same as the Rolls-Royce Merlin puts out, at least in stock configuration. This airplane, like any of the radials, is supercharged. There's not much for you to see. Yeah. Takeoffs in this airplane in modern day, again, the Navy's not paying for the gas or the engines. 45 to 46 inches of manifold pressure. It will run up to 57 inches of manifold pressure. This airplane has a 2-speed, just like a P-51, supercharger. You get above a certain altitude, back off on the manifold pressure a little bit. There's a lever on the left side of the cockpit where you can increase the boost and then you add power. You get your sea level power restored. Again, Navy paying for everything. This will climb around 4,000 feet a minute. I've seen that for short periods of time, but that's using the inertia. Ton of fun, no bad habits. Anyway, I've been power shopping for work. I leave tomorrow morning, 5 a.m. departure. Another 2 weeks in Alaska. So I'll take this with me, do some editing. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in a couple weeks.